One of the most recognizable and beloved superhero groups ever, the X-Men have seen their fair share of ups and downs in gaming. They've often served as the spark for several well-known franchises and offered their own appealing power fantasy. Despite the number of changes throughout the years and some shabby games to their credit, there are still some excellent titles that are worth looking back on. So let's take a look at the 11 best X-Men games of all time. X-Men 1992. If you went to arcades back in the day, Konami's X-Men was your first real introduction to the group in gaming. The storyline of this beat-em-up was simple. Magneto is on the warpath, and as either Cyclops, Colossus, Wolverine, Storm, Nightcrawler, or Dazzler, you had to stop him. This involved fighting numerous Sentinels and Reavers, tussling with the classic henchmen like the Blob and Juggernaut, and eventually battling Magneto himself. Each team member had different abilities, but overall it was your standard beat-em-up fare. Then again, it also supported up to 6 players simultaneously, allowing for the entire team to band together and battle the forces of evil, until someone ran out of quarters and awkwardly shuffled away, that is. X-Men Mutant Apocalypse. Released in 1994, X-Men Mutant Apocalypse was another platforming beat-em-up from Capcom. Available for the Super NES, the title featured 5 different X-Men: Beast, Cyclops, Gambit, Psylocke, and Wolverine, on a mission to Genosha. Of course, you inevitably had to deal with Apocalypse and then Magneto en route to finishing the game. But X-Men Mutant Apocalypse offered different playstyles for each character, implementing different button combinations for certain moves for some added variety. Aside from the progression of the story, the game didn't take many risks, but it was a solid action platformer with the X-Men, and that was enough. X-Men 2 Clone Wars. Before Capcom and Activision really ran wild with the franchise, Sega tried its hand at some X-Men titles. X-Men 2 Clone Wars featured several of our heroes dealing with the Phalanx in an action platformer setup, with improved visuals, more complex gameplay with each of the 7 playable characters having their own unique abilities, and a wider selection of levels compared to its predecessor. X-Men 2 Clone Wars was a good setup. It's kind of a footnote in history now, especially considering the impact of other X-Men games, but it was an enjoyable enough title. X-Men GameMasters Legacy. Remember when the Game Gear was a thing? Sega probably doesn't, but it brought the X-Men franchise to handheld form, segregating it from its Genesis counterparts with unique storylines and gameplay. X-Men GameMasters Legacy was a sequel to the simply titled X-Men for the Game Gear that included a whopping 8 characters, including Rogue and Cable. Players even got to battle some lesser-known threats like Sienna Blaze and Trevor Fitzroy, along with mainstays like Apocalypse. The visuals and controls were on point, even if the Genesis games were superior in both departments. X-Men Children of the Atom. The X-Men's foray into the world of fighting games began on an incredibly high note with X-Men Children of the Atom in 1994. Capcom's fast-paced action and combo-heavy mechanics would make for one of the crazier and more gorgeous-looking fighters at the time. The X power gauge was your standard super meter, allowing for X ability and Hyper X moves to destroy an opponent. X-Men Children of the Atom also brought in some cool additions to the fighting game formula, like super jumps and aiming projectile attacks, not to mention the classic range of non-playable boss characters that would relentlessly school you. Little did we know at the time just how much the title would set the tone for many of Capcom's future fighters. X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Though Marvel Super Heroes was technically the first fighting game to feature multiple characters from different franchises in the Marvel Universe, X-Men vs. Street Fighter was the first real crossover fighter between 2 completely different brands, namely Capcom and Marvel. It followed up on the brilliance of Children of the Atom, introducing tag battles with 2 characters, variable blocks, and the screen-destroying variable combinations where both characters on a team would use their hyper combos together. With 17 total characters from both franchises, gorgeous graphics, and addictive gameplay, X-Men vs. Street Fighter was a hit in the arcades and received an excellent port to the Sega Saturn, followed by a middling port to the PlayStation 1. X-Men Mutant Academy. While Capcom was working its 2D magic and creating a combo-heavy fighter, the X-Men Mutant Academy series went for a 2.5D approach. Released for the PlayStation 1 and, strangely enough, the Game Boy Color, X-Men Mutant Academy offered a whopping 10 characters to choose from with 4 bosses that had to be unlocked for regular play. Though the game didn't really differentiate itself from the competition, it was recognized for the quality of its visuals and gameplay. And the Game Boy Color version had Apocalypse as a secret character, so there was that. X-Men Mutant Academy 2. Paradox Development would continue its run with the series in X-Men Mutant Academy 2. Published by Activision in 2001, it's the best in the Mutant Academy series, with numerous characters to choose from, including Phoenix, Havoc, Mystique, Magneto, and for some reason, Spider-Man. Arcade mode offered standard playthroughs with each character, complete with their own individual endings. Academy training let you unlock different costumes, and survival was, as the name implied, about defeating as many enemies as possible without dying. Overall, a worthwhile sequel even if it lacked in mode variety. X-Men Origins Wolverine. Of course, it wasn't long before Activision began publishing movie-licensed titles in the franchise like X-Men Origins Wolverine. Starring everyone's favorite anti-hero, the hack-and-slash gameplay took several cues with light attacks, heavy attacks, and of course, a rage meter to annihilate foes. Then again, you could also lunge at foes, which was a nice addition to the formula. To say that X-Men Origins Wolverine was a critically divisive game would be an understatement. It was released on so many different platforms, with the Xbox 360, PC, and PS3 versions garnering the most praise, while the PS2, Nintendo DS, and Wii versions were highly panned, largely due to their visuals and controls. All in all, not the best X-Men adaptation, but far from the worst at the time. X-Men Legends. Before there was Marvel Ultimate Alliance, Raven Software and Activision brought us X-Men Legends, an action RPG with 4-character teams that could be played solo or with friends. Partaking in story and challenge missions, players would receive XP and acquire different upgrades for the X-Men over time. Furthermore, during combat it was possible to combine attacks on a single foe. X-Men Legends was a totally new approach for the franchise, offering solid action with sharp, cel-shaded characters and multiplayer. X-Men Legends 2: Rise of Apocalypse. Of course, given the success of its predecessor, it only made sense that Activision would develop a sequel. Apocalypse was the big bad this time around, and it was up to the X-Men and the Brotherhood of Mutants to stop him. This resulted in a massively expanded cast of characters, though the standard 4-member teams were still in play. More mutant powers were added along with items for improved characters, destructible environments, and online multiplayer support. It was an excellent sequel, and despite not really getting another follow-up, it served as the catalyst for the Marvel Ultimate Alliance series. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.